You may know Cynthia Roseberry from her work as the executive director of the Clemency Project 2014. President Obama, in his last 3 years in office, has really attempted to ramp up the amount of clemencies to erase some of the disparate sentences and do it retroactively. Cynthia is at the epicenter of that, coordinating and getting law firms from all over the country to volunteer to represent people who otherwise wouldn't have access to the process. Done amazing work. You may know her as a fierce federal defender. You may know her as an individual who created a misdemeanor law clinic using law students to make up some of this disparity in the indigent defense in Illinois. But I'm going to tell you one story, and the first time I met Cynthia, that really epitomizes who she is as a person. And trust me when I tell you, don't let her gentle demeanor and soft voice fool you. There is a lion inside this woman, all right? We were named to the Chuck Colson Task Force on Federal Prison Overcrowding together. And we had our first hearing. And an individual who was incarcerated, I believe his name was Donald, came up and talked about the impact that his incarceration had on him. In the federal system, he moved far away from home, poor access to programs, just a bunch. And he shared from the heart the impact it not only had on him, but had on his family. And at some point, he became so emotional, he started crying. And he couldn't say another word, but he had more to say. And as we sat there, and as I sat there, I felt helpless. I wanted to help. But we were up on the dais, and what am I going to do? There's one person in that room who helped. Cynthia got up out of her seat, walked around, and did what everyone in that room wanted to do. Got up, walked up, put her arm around him, and comforted him so he could finish. That's who we're going to hear from right now, Cynthia Roseberry.
My father was my first superhero. That was the label I gave him. He was smart. He taught me, before I even went to kindergarten, that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. He sang opera and spoke German, and he quoted philosophers. One of his favorite quotes was, "On the plains of hesitation, bleach the bones of countless millions who, at the dawn of victory, stopped to rest and died resting." I remember it even now. Now, as a child, I had no idea what that meant. It just sounded so magnificent coming from my father. I just liked being around him. I remember when I was a little girl, he would take me for a ride in his car, and I'd sit next to him on the front seat, and as we drove through town, people would blow their horn and wave at my father. And I thought, my dad is so important. He's my superhero, cape and all. Now, my father was never confined to a 12 by 12 heart space. So I don't know and haven't walked the path of the 1.7 million children of incarcerated parents. But our paths have crossed. For nearly 20 years, I've been a criminal defense lawyer, and I've sat and rocked with my clients and their family members, and I've gotten to know them, and they've gotten to know me. I remember one client who got a life sentence. And after the judge gave the sentence, we went back to the back lockup, and I grabbed the bars. I remember grabbing them, and I remember just falling to my knees and weeping for my client. By many measures, a life sentence was a win because it had once been a death penalty case. I remember when I explained the death penalty to his mother. She fell into my arms weeping and said, "Don't let them kill my son." I didn't know what to say to her, so I just held her as she wept, and I could feel the pain pulsing through her body. So this life sentence was a win, but it was a bitter victory. I remember as I was crumpled there on the floor, my client reached down through the bars and touched my shoulder and told me everything was going to be okay. He comforted me. Most recently, in my work as manager of Clemency Project 2014, I managed about 4,000 lawyers as we reviewed over 36,000 applicants for presidential clemency. Many of these people have mandatory minimum sentences, and their only hope for liberty of reuniting with their families is presidential clemency. I've talked with mothers and fathers and children and grandchildren, and I've heard their angst. I've read their letters drenched in desperation. And I've told some of them, I'm going to do my best. I had to tell others, there's nothing I can do. And I told many of them, as I've said to my clients over the years, the blood that runs in your veins, it carries the DNA of survivors. Survivors of systems set up to tear them down. So by your birthright, you will survive this. So I've been close to the abandonment and aloneness and shame associated with the children of incarcerated parents. I've stood next to people who felt invisible in the room. And although my path is not their path, I've walked a path paved with similar emotion. Today, I stand before you as the daughter of an alcoholic father. Now, I don't mean to suggest that my road was nearly as tough as the children of incarcerated parents. I could hold my father and he could hold me. But there were parts of him, because of his alcoholism, that I couldn't touch. He died when I was 17, and so I had only a little time with him. And before I knew who I was, he was already gone. As the child of an alcoholic father, I experienced shame. He would show up at my school drunk and stumbling, and the kids would point and they'd laugh and they'd make fun of him. And I felt embarrassed and ashamed, and I felt ashamed for being embarrassed. And I didn't want him to be my father. I didn't want him to be there. But when his alcoholism controlled him completely, he didn't show up at all. And while other children had fathers who showed up for their cheerleading or gymnastics, my father wasn't there. My high school coach stood in for him at our daddy-daughter dance. And I wondered, why did my father have to mess up? Why couldn't he just do the right thing and be there for me? In my family, I felt alone as I watched all of my siblings become addicts, just like my father. That was the legacy he left us, I thought. I watched 2 of my siblings die from the complications associated with their addiction. And I watched a 3rd sibling win $12.5 million in the lottery and lose it all to addiction. And so I was angry with my father because he left this legacy and then he left us alone to handle it, to deal with it on our own. But you know, as I started to unpack it for myself and to look at my father as a human being, to take off his superhero cape and the labels I'd attached to him, I realized he was just a human being. I mean, the first thing I realized was those people who were honking their horns and blowing were probably blowing at a drunk driver, right, all over the road. But I also realized that my father walked a different path than me. And if I was going to understand him, I had to understand his path. I had to see the world through the lens through which he saw the world. My father was born in 1913 in the South. His father was born in the 1800s and worked on the segregated railroad system. I can't imagine what my father must have endured. I imagine that my grandmother taught him to look down and to step off of the curb and to be invisible. And I imagine he felt humiliated by that and embarrassed. He probably had to be the man of the house when my grandfather was gone on the railroad. But the moment he left those doors, leaving the relative safety of my grandparents' home, he was a boy. A college-educated boy. And so I don't know what he endured. I imagine that he had to swallow anger one time too many so that he looked for solace in the bottom of a bottle of gin. I recently heard a woman whose father was incarcerated say, "My dad is not who they say he is." And I thought about my father. I thought about how I've told so many judges on behalf of my clients, given the right set of circumstances, all of us are capable of doing all of the things that all of us do. And so looking at my father through his humanity gave me space to forgive him and to forgive me. I understood that he was just a man who made mistakes. He was loving. He bought a home for us near a library so he could take us there. He doted on my siblings and me. He taught us to play tennis. And despite all that he must have seen and endured in the world, he taught us to be good people. My father was funny. He could cook a mean pot of spaghetti. He served it with little rye bread, the little party rise, and I loved that about him. He was loving and kind and funny and smart and human and in pain and broken and doing the best he could. He probably stopped to rest and died resting. And I realized he never meant to hurt me or make me feel abandoned or alone. And although he's gone, he's left me with hope. Hope in the face of barriers that labels tend to build. Hope that he is not the label they attached to him at school when those kids pointed. He was more than that, and he showed me that his love was stronger than those labels. He showed me that the labels they try to attach to us, we don't have to accept, and we don't have to believe them. He taught me that masters like Picasso and Jacob Lawrence might paint a picture on a canvas only to repaint another picture on top, creating a masterpiece. We are the masters of our lives. And our lives are our canvas. And if we don't like the picture that's painted by the labels the world tries to give us, we can paint another picture. Labels be damned. Thank you, Dad.